So, trying to block the military. California formally sues the White House. Gavin Newsom calls it an unprecedented power grab. How the president, though, is responding tonight. Plus, the ICE raids at the center of it all. What are they actually like? Our Allie Bradley is in the heartland tonight as ICE agents carry out operations elsewhere. Also this evening, tough testimony, potentially. President Biden's top aides now say they will testify about what they saw involving the former president's mental state. We'll show you who is talking about their former boss. But first tonight, here from the Hill, Trump and the troops. As the president defends the use of the National Guard and Marines in Southern California, he also, on the other coast, just spoke to troops in Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Generations of Army heroes did not shed their blood on distant shores only to watch our country be destroyed by invasion and third world lawlessness here at home, like is happening in California.
Just part of what we heard from the president this evening. Hello, good evening. Thanks for being with us tonight here on the Hill. I'm Blake Burman. The big story here, of course, remains the protests, the riots in Southern California, and the response. We begin first with our Nancy Liu, who is live once again in downtown Los Angeles. Nancy, I was just listening to you talk to Connell there. It sounds like things are picking up. Tell me what you see.
Yeah, things are changing by the minute, Blake. We just had a U.S. Marshal unit come through, and you see the anti-ICE protesters surrounding those vehicles. It just pulled into the Federal Detention Center in front of us there. There you see the California National Guard escorting that unit in, but you know, that's the anti-ICE protesters out here. This is where detainees have been taken. This is a federal detention center, and this is where the California National Guard has been posted up and trying to protect the workers of DHS and ICE. Down the street here, we have a significant LAPD presence, Blake, and it is far different than what we saw yesterday. This has been quite locked down. Protesters who were out here earlier have largely been dispersed. They have, were given a dispersal order, and many of them did disperse, but many of them stayed. But you can see the buses up ahead there, Blake. Those were brought in just minutes ago, and, certainly a sign that they were about to make mass arrests. We see the police here with their zip ties. We see them here with their non-lethal weapons and their batons at the ready. We've seen them make at least one arrest. I've also seen things thrown at law enforcement, at least one water bottle. So it's definitely a volatile situation out here, but again, it's a new standoff here outside the Federal Detention Center. And Blake, it certainly seems like LAPD is trying to corral this, control this, and prevent it from becoming what happened last night, which is mayhem all over downtown LA and looting of many stores, including an Apple store, a jewelry store, which was wiped clean, and even a cannabis store that was looted last night. So I don't know if you've heard, Blake, but Mayor Biden is now considering a possible curfew for LA. She said earlier that she was discussing that with the LA Police Chief, Jim McDonald. We have not gotten word yet, but that is a possibility here in LA.
Nancy, as I watch you and I listen to you and I see what's playing out there behind you and sort of really the last 10 to 15 minutes or so, and you describe what's changed with those buses being brought in there and a possible, as you put it, curfew. Do you have a sense of why in these last, let's call it 10, 15, 20 minutes or so, it's changed? Is it just simply it's 3 o'clock where you are there in Southern California, and maybe that was the time where they said, okay, we're gonna go forward with tougher enforcement, or do you have a sense of why?
Yeah.
Why now?
It is possible that because people are leaving work, I know that the courthouse workers were expressing concern about their safety. We know the federal workers, they were told not to come in. The federal court operations were shut down today, and that led to confusion at the Immigration and ICE office. You know, people were showing up for their ICE hearings, and the building was shut down. So it might be because of concern for workers downtown. There's also concern about the 101 freeway, which is right in front of me. California Highway Patrol has now blocked all entrances to the freeway, so protesters can't shut that down, which they've managed to do over at least 2 days over the past, you know, this is day 5 of these LA protests, and, you know, it's been chaotic to say the least, but today it certainly seems like, you know, the city, LAPD, trying to corral things and control it earlier.
Nancy, what's the, you've been covering this for days now. At this point, now on day 5, and as you wonder what may or may not come next here, what's the one thing, Nancy, that stood out to you? And at this moment, the one thing that you're watching?
Well, we're watching, you know, federal forces guarding these federal buildings. We're awaiting the Marines. We have yet to see Marine presence here in downtown LA, but on social media I've heard that they're out in Compton, they're out in South Central LA. People are posting about seeing this. But the LA police chief, Blake, has talked about no coordination between the federal effort, the military effort, as well as no coordination with the city. And the police chief has said, you know, that makes it harder on them to do their jobs because they do want to coordinate their work with federal officials. And so it's made the job more difficult. And now, you know, we see more California Highway Patrol, and that is because of Governor Newsom, who has, you know, ordered more California Highway Patrol to LA. So not only are we seeing more Marines, more National Guard, more California Highway Patrol, more LAPD, more Sheriff's Office, but an interesting point, Blake, is that we now have more U.S. military troops in LA than we do in Syria.
We're going to go through that right now. Our Nancy Liu live on the ground. Nancy, if you see something that you think the audience should know, let us know. We'll pop you back up on the camera.
Absolutely.
Nancy Liu live there in Southern California. So, and Nancy, thank you, by the way. The military front and center is part of this national conversation. And as the nation watches the streets of Los Angeles, we wanted to take you by the numbers here because Nancy just hit on some of this. Right now, there's somewhere in the area of about 2,500 troops in Los Angeles, 1,700 from the National Guard, more on the way, and about 700 or so Marines. Now, the Pentagon says the military response costing the U.S. About $134 million. Now, right now, as Nancy just mentioned, there is a larger military presence in Los Angeles than in Syria, about 2,000 U.S. troops stationed in Syria right now. Roughly the same number of U.S. personnel, by the way, in Iraq. But the Los Angeles deployments, much smaller than the larger U.S. military presence, as you would think and you would hope, right? In Germany and Japan, for example, as of 2024, roughly 35,000 U.S. troops deployed to Germany, roughly 53,000 are in Japan. And we are getting plenty of reaction to the military presence there on the ground. Today, for example, the California Governor Gavin Newsom asked a federal judge for emergency intervention to try to limit President Trump's deployment of the National Guard in Los Angeles. That federal judge has now declined Governor Newsom's request. The North Carolina Congressman Mark Harris joins me now. He is a member of the Judiciary Committee. Congressman Harris, thanks for being with us tonight. The president was just down the road from you there in Fort Bragg a little while ago talking to troops. You watched the scenes here in Los Angeles, and what catches your attention?
Well, Blake, it's great to be with you tonight. Thank you for having me on your program. It's you know, what we've seen really unfold, not just tonight, but over these last 4 or 5 nights have certainly made an impression, I think, on the American people, because we're really seeing what happens as a result of an open border policy that has now come to a head, if you will, as you've got an administration that is committed to law and order, an administration that is committed to preserving safety for all of our American citizens. And I think what you're seeing happen here is really just sort of the results of that. I did have the opportunity to hear the police chief do his press conference on Sunday night, and I thought it was very telling as he just kind of described the scene and how things were working there. And, you know, it's something that, quite frankly, the American people are seeing play out in front of their eyes. And obviously, we've got a conflict here between the governor that is willing to let his state burn.
There are concerns, though. You're a Republican from North Carolina, where the president was speaking down the road, and on the other coast there in California. Here's one of your colleagues from the Republican side of the aisle, Congressman David Valadao. He said, "I remain concerned about ongoing ICE operations throughout California and will continue my conversations with the administration, urging them to prioritize the removal of known criminals over the hardworking people who have lived peacefully in the valley for years." That's a Republican congressman. What risks does the president run by maybe moving too far, even for some within his own party?
No, I think the president is not going to move too far. I think the president got elected for this, Blake. If you really think about it, I mean, he made this the centerpiece of his campaign, that he was going to solidify our border and secure the border, and he was going to make sure that we deported those that were criminals, that were here illegally. And the American people, I think, overall are supportive of this. And what you're seeing happen is when you've got a state and a city that has got these sanctuary laws, and that's one of the things that the chief of police pointed out, that you've got the federal government who is recognizing that their responsibility is law and order and safety, and yet you've got state and local laws that at this particular time are in conflict with it.
What's the line for you, though, Congressman? Because there was a report out in the Wall Street Journal that Stephen Miller spoke at ICE headquarters, according to the Journal, at the end of last month, and he basically told agents, if we go out right now, we can get 30 of them. And he said the target should be, for example, Home Depot or 7-Eleven convenience stores. Are you comfortable with agents going into places like that and line and businesses?
Listen, I am very comfortable with what ICE agents are doing if they are going after the criminals that are here illegally in our country in order to secure our communities and make them safe again. We've heard too many stories week after week after week of an illegal alien here that has committed a crime, taken the life of an American citizen, and it's just got to stop. And again,
so you say criminals, and that's obviously a bipartisan issue. Then there's mass deportations. Are you good with that?
Yes, that's the focus right now. They've made very clear. Tom Homan has made it clear that we're going after the criminals. We're those that have records, and we are getting them, and we are deporting them. And one of the things that's part of the big, beautiful bill, quite frankly, is we've allocated funds for 10,000 additional ICE agents. We've set up for up to 100,000 beds in order to carry out these deportations that we're needing to do. So, again, I think the American people overall are behind what the president's doing. He's determined to secure Los Angeles. And let's face it, the other night I was listening to all the interviews from the mayor while the Democrat politicians were saying, we have it all under control. We don't have any help. They were telling that to me on one side of the screen, when in the split screen, I was watching 8, 10, 12 police cars burning to the ground. I was watching people throw scooters off bridges, just nailing highway patrol cars. And listen, we've got to stand behind our law enforcement and stand behind our ICE agents that are out there risking their lives.
We'll leave it there. Mark Harris is a Republican from North Carolina, the president down the road from him today. He, like many of us, watching what's going on in Los Angeles. Congressman, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Blake.
So we are going to continue throughout the hour here, obviously, to keep our eyes on what's going on there in Los Angeles. You just heard Nancy Liu, for example, talk about this is just, once again, picked up, at least from her vantage point, and she would know. She's been there for days. And she thinks that they're maybe starting to move into sort of the next phase of this, at least as it relates to this day in day 5, as this develops and unfolds. If it does and when it does, we will have our eyes on Los Angeles. But still to come tonight here on The Hill, a story you will see on just this channel and this network, NewsNation. Our Allie Bradley goes on a ride-along with ICE as they round up illegal immigrants. And this is happening well beyond California, well beyond the southern border. You see where Allie is tonight? She's in Nebraska. Her exclusive reporting when we continue, plus the very latest as we see it there. Stay with us. I'm Blake Burman. See you back on the other side. 4 minutes. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. A lot of action going on all over the country. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Burman. Bottom left of the screen, you're looking at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland. President Trump set to land there any moment now after giving his speech in Fort Bragg. Of course, right side of your screen, Los Angeles, California, as the protests and the demonstrations pick up there. And we keep our eyes on Southern California as that remains the big story here in Washington and beyond today. But back here in our nation's capital, Republicans are also ratcheting up the pressure on the former administration and the former president, Joe Biden. Joining me now in studio, Joe Khalil with the very latest. Joe, a handful of Joe Biden's top officials in his White House, now going to be testifying as we know it up on Capitol Hill?
Behind closed doors.
Okay.
So this is going to be 4 people we can confirm that were Biden staffers who have now agreed to come before the House Oversight Committee as part of their investigation into the final days in the White House, who was calling the shots. We can confirm those 4 are Neera Tanden, Anthony Bernal, who actually worked for the First Lady, but it was known he had outsized influence, Annie Tomasini, and Ashley Williams. They have agreed to come and give a deposition. Now, obviously, Blake, if you're around D.C. and you cover it, those names ring a bell. For the vast majority of the country, very likely that they're not familiar with these people. President Trump continues to reference this when he gives public appearances and speeches. This is what he said today.
They were put into the United States and allowed to stay here because we had a grossly unfit president who listened to whoever was operating the auto pen, and they allowed these people to stay.
So, Blake, those 4, Kevin O'Connor, the former White House doctor, not voluntarily, but by subpoena, he will also be testifying later on in a couple weeks.
It begins, it appears. Joe Kay with us tonight. Joe, thank you. Joining me now, Bill McGinley, former Trump White House cabinet secretary. Lindsey Granger, NewsNation contributor as well. Bill, Lindsey, thanks for being here tonight again. Los Angeles, right side of the screen. But, Bill, let me start with you. What's going to come of this? Are they going to cite executive privilege? Are we actually ever going to see any of the testimony here?
I think because they're doing a voluntary appearance before the committees, the lawyers have probably worked out the parameters of their testimony in these closed-door depositions before they appear in a hearing. I think there's a couple of things to consider. Number one, executive privilege is something that their lawyers or the president, Biden's lawyers, may try to assert, but the Trump White House is going to have a say in that, or at least try to influence that. Other people, if something untoward happened, may just try to claim the Fifth Amendment, because there's also a parallel and DOJ investigation that has already been announced.
So does that DOJ investigation handcuff him, then, essentially handcuff the Hill?
I don't think it does handcuff the Hill. I think what it does is it's going to expedite the release of some sort of report on this, or if there was anything that went wrong within the Biden White House on these issues, we could see some indictments or some people get very uncomfortable quickly.
Lindsey, are you surprised that it moved in this direction, that they're actually going to head up to the Hill and give sworn testimony potentially?
Yeah, I'm quite surprised, honestly, because I was the first one to acknowledge that Biden should have stepped aside, not only for his party, but because it would be a good idea based on how much the American public wanted to go in a different direction. But I think that this is way more of a political distraction than a probe. I think if we look at Joe Biden's name and how much Trump references it, this is an intentional way to keep the headlines on that topic as opposed to the topic at hand. And I know that there are real inquiries and people that are concerned about whether or not Biden had all of his cognitive abilities, and we can comb through that forever. But I think this misses the mark where Americans are actually concerned with real stuff that's happening right now, like Medicaid cuts, like inflation, and like on terror strategy.
All right, we'll leave it there. I'm running out of time, of course. We keep our eyes on L.A. and Will on the other side of the break. Lindsey Granger, appreciate you. Bill McGinley, see you back here later in the show. Thank you both. Appreciate it. Still much more ahead here on the Hill. A NewsNation exclusive on the other side. All the conversations about ICE, right, as we watch these anti-ICE demonstrations and protests and riots in L.A. What is it like actually being with ICE when they conduct these raids? Allie Bradley, live with us here on the Hill. Stay with us. Thanks for being with us as we continue the coverage in Southern California. All right, thanks for being with us tonight here on the Hill. 6:30 here in Washington, 3:30 out on the West Coast. A live look on the streets of Los Angeles as anti-ICE protests still ongoing. The Trump administration deploying roughly 2,500 troops from both the National Guard and the Marines combined to L.A. to assist local law enforcement there. The Pentagon says the military response costing roughly $134 million. Our Nancy Liu live on the ground in Los Angeles. Nancy, we spoke a half hour or so ago. What, if anything, has changed since then?
Yeah. Well, I moved over to the other side of the federal complex, Blake, just to give you a look that the lockdown is just as tight on this side. We've got layers of LAPD out here. They're ready with non-lethal force. They've got their batons. Some of them also have the weapons ready to shoot, rubber bullets as well as the foam bullets. And you can see some of them have zip ties. So they are at the ready to make any arrests should they need to. But this is the federal complex. The Roy Ball Federal Building is what you're looking at right now. And behind it is the Metropolitan Center.
Nancy, I got to jump in. The president speaking. Let's listen.
By ICE. Yeah.
Incredible people, and it was an honor to see it.
President, is there something you think you can de-escalate tensions with Governor Newsom?
Not with the governor, but there is. I mean, I've always had a good relationship with him. He just doesn't do a very good job. He should have never been allowed to start. And if we didn't get involved, Los Angeles would be burning down right now, just like the houses burned down.
Are you concerned about anything that could go wrong by having the military there? They're trained for different purposes.
No, it can only go right. By having the military, it de-escalates. I mean, that was the only way. These people are agitators. They're troublemakers. I believe many of them are paid. I watched them breaking up the sidewalks with a big hammer, handing pieces of the concrete to other people.
Who do you think is paying for that?
Somebody's paying for it. Thank you.
Might have something to do with it.
Thank you for saying that. Somebody's paying for that. I watched total professionals. He's banging the curb, banging the granite, banging the concrete. And he had a whole group of people. They lined up like totally professional, grabbed the big chunks, and they dropped it on the soldiers. They dropped it on the Los Angeles police. These are insurrectionists. They're agitators or troublemakers. At a minimum, they're troublemakers.
Mr. President, Governor Newsom did not speak to you a day ago, as you said, in the Oval Office earlier. What's your response to
Well, I gave him, it wasn't a day ago, it was a little longer than that, and I presented the phone conversation to Fox News. John Roberts and Molly Line at Fox News, because they were the ones that said it. And we actually spent 16-point-something minutes on the phone. And I told him he's got to get his act together because you're going to have some bad times in Los Angeles if he doesn't. We had a pleasant conversation. The proof was from the phone company. It was from the phone company. So I spoke to him at a certain time. I'm sure you all saw it. You saw it. But why would you ask me that question if you saw it? You know, I mean, he asked me a question, and then he says, yeah, I saw that you spoke to him. Yeah, I spoke to him for over 16 minutes. And I told him to get his act together, but he hasn't been able to do that. I mean, the man really, we could have a great, you know, we have an Olympics coming up. We have to put the right foot forward. We have to do a job. We have a lot of people all over the world watching Los Angeles. We've got the Olympics, and we have this guy allowing this to happen. Let me tell you, when you watch these agitators break up concrete and hand it out to people as they stood in line to get it, these have to be paid troublemakers.
Mr. President, you appear to say that the governor and the mayor paid them. Do you believe that the governor and the mayor paid the agitators?
No, I don't say the governor and the mayor. I said somebody's paying them, I think. And if they're not, they're just troublemakers. What can I tell you? But I believe somebody's paying them. I mean, I've never seen somebody with a big hammer so professional. Now, they took the bricks away from them. So they say, how do we get in? The military did. How do we get in, and what do we do? They said, I have an idea. Let's break up the concrete, and that's even better than bricks, and that's what happened.
Yeah, you just witnessed an amazing spectacle, a flex on our military. What impressed you the most?
I think the total love for the military. I mean, I was with the generals. They're explaining the different maneuvers, and the love they have for the Army and the military is beautiful. They're really great people. And I've never seen anything quite like that. I don't think any other president has either. You know, they really put on a good show. I asked them, did you do that for Biden? They said no, they didn't do it for Biden. I wonder why.
There could be some pretty big protests this weekend.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I know this. As long as we have the military there, the protests won't mean anything. Last night, if we weren't there, they would have burned down the city. But they did not a lot of damage other than they broke up a lot of concrete looking for weapons. You know, those are weapons. If that hits somebody in the head, the person's dead. You know that, right?
Yes, sir.
What do you mean by a very heavy force will be met with the protest?
Oh, the military will be very heavy force. I'm very proud to tell you that. They might as well turn around. They're wasting their time. Some of them will end up in jail for a long period of time. They use weapons. That concrete is a weapon, a dangerous weapon. Worse than a brick, heavier than a brick. And they were dropping it off bridges and throwing it at soldiers and police. They're not doing that. You know, I went in my first term, I waited for governors to call in the military, and they didn't want to do it. And I watched Minneapolis and other places burn for a long time. And I said, when are you going to call? When are you going to call? And I said, if I ever do this again, if they're not responsive at the beginning, not at the end. You know, I called in the military in Minneapolis, but it was 7 days. I waited for this guy, the same guy that ran for vice president, who's a very dumb person. He's a low IQ individual, like many Democrats are. But I waited for him to call him in. I kept waiting. I'd call him every day and say, when are you calling him? And finally I called him, because I'm not going to wait. They were destroying the city. The whole city was burning down. Horrible. Okay.
You guys have set a hearing for Thursday from Governor Newsom's lawsuit. Do you think your administration will be successful Thursday for the hearing?
Well, even Senator Fetterman said very strongly that this is horrible what they're doing, and that the Democrats are making a big mistake by not talking about it. And I agree with that. I think this is in a league with, and maybe even worse in a true sense, what they're doing is now worse than men playing in women's sports. I think that's a ridiculous thing. Open borders. You take a look at open borders. Open borders is what caused it. Many of these people, many of them, not all of them, I guess, but many of them came through the Joe Biden stupid open borders. Really sad to watch. It's very sad to watch this being our country. Now, with our National Guard and our, fairly low number of Marines, they had no chance. And if you look, they were a little bit tougher than the police. Did you notice that? The police are trained not to do it. They're really trained. They're under tremendous political constraint. They're great police. I know the police in L.A. I know the force. They're very good. But They're not allowed to do their thing. They're just not allowed. They're restricted by radical left politicians who are pretty shameful.
As Commander-in-Chief, sir, what rules of engagement do you want for the military? What limitations?
A very simple rule of engagement. If they're dangerous, if they're throwing concrete or bricks, if they're spitting in the face of the police or whoever's in front of them, if they're punching people, if they're doing all of the things that you see done for the last 3 nights, that I would say is engagement. We need to keep our city straight. I want to save Los Angeles. And Newsom is totally incompetent. He's not going to do it. Look at the fires he had. He had fires where half the city, it seemed, burned down. What was it, 25,000 houses, all because he wouldn't take water. I released the water from the Pacific Northwest, and it came down millions of gallons a day. And it's right there right now. They'd like to send it back. There's something wrong with these people. All I want in terms of engagement, I just want to see peace. If there's peace, we get out. If there's even a chance of no peace, we stay there until there's peace. And a lot of people are being arrested. The rioters, or whatever you want to call them, they better know a lot of people are being arrested. They're going to be in jail for a long time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
You've been listening live to President Trump, Joint Base Andrews in Maryland, as he returns from his trip to Fort Bragg in North Carolina. We thank you for being with us tonight here on the Hill. I'm Blake Burman. Joined with me now, Congressman Tony Gonzalez, Republican from the state of Texas, down on the southwest border. Congressman, thanks for being with us tonight. As you listened and watched along with us, you have an interesting perspective for lots of reasons, not just because you're from Texas. Your district is, I think, the largest land area along the southern border, right? And so as we see the President of the United States drive off and wave to the cameras there, and then we see what's unfolding in Los Angeles on the streets there, you know these ICE officers. What is the challenge that you believe that they are dealing with and law enforcement is dealing with right now?
Yeah, first, it's welcoming to have a president that's on the scene, that is talking about it, willing to walk through what the responses are on the ground. I'm very close to a lot of the ICE agents. Yeah. And I was speaking to a Border Patrol agent who's part of BORTAC. These are the special forces, if you will, of Border Patrol. They had just got done hunting down a escaped convict in Arkansas. Okay. And they were on their way to hunt down a National Guardsman that had murdered his 3 daughters. Like, these guys deal with the worst of the worst. And they were in El Paso, and they had to take an 11-hour drive to Los Angeles. He gets there, and they immediately get put in the front lines. 5 days later, they're exhausted. So we really have to get behind our law enforcement to make sure the lawlessness doesn't get out of control.
What is the line here, though? Because there's, when the president campaigned on fixing the southwest border, the numbers are clear. What happened in the Biden administration and what's happened in the first 4 months of the Trump administration. That's one thing. But then when you see troops going in and people being deported at their place of work, that then brings it to the next level, and I wonder what concern, if any, you have.
Yeah, well, the troops coming in are because of these anarchists, right, which are completely different than an advocate. An advocate, I'm all about somebody protesting, whether you agree with it or don't agree with it. That's what we need. Perfectly okay with that. But burning a city to the ground, I don't want to see that happen in L.A. Don't want to see that happen anywhere else. So to me, what brings us together is if we focus on convicted criminal illegal aliens. There's over 600,000 of those people in our country.
So that's the term, convicted
criminal
which is
illegal
what
aliens.
Your colleague Mark Harris, who I spoke with at the top of the show, basically used the same term as well. But that's different from mass deportations, all across.
Hell,
right?
Mass deportations of convicted criminal aliens.
Well, what about, I was reading in the Laredo Morning Times. Here was I know you don't represent Laredo, it's down the road from you, but ICE conducts worksite enforcement in the Laredo area. Do you think that should be the next phase of this?
Well, I think details matter, right? Who are they going after in that case? If you go down the route of all the people that are here illegally, and you're not going to apprehend everybody at once, we're talking tens of millions of people. I'm not even debating that. What I want to say is what I want us to talk about is, can we focus on one thing? You know this. Washington can't do more than one or two things. So what if we did one thing? What if that one thing was going after the worst of the worst, the convicted criminal illegal alien that's a murderer, that's a rapist?
Folks are with you there. I guess the part of what the protesters here are saying is this isn't the worst of the worst. Like the Wall Street Journal story that came out with Stephen Miller saying, I challenge you to go to and this is the Journal's reporting, to go to Home Depot and 7-Eleven. That's sort of the concern of some of these folks, and that's where I wonder how your side of the aisle views that next step.
Yeah, I've talked to DHS officials, and I've asked for, and there'll be more of this, I've asked for, well, who are the people that are apprehended? Are they indeed these convicted criminals? Or are they somebody who overstayed their visa? Or are they somebody who, finished their adjudication process and were denied? Like, who are they? I want to get the breakdown of it. But once again, those are more sensitive cases. If you're focused on going after the convicted criminal, everybody gets behind you.
You served in Iraq and Afghanistan.
That's right.
The president was just asked about the rules of engagement for
Sure.
the Marines there. He said if it's dangerous, for example, brick throwing, spitting, or punching. As someone who served and watching Marines there on one of the largest cities in the United States, what do you believe the rules of engagement should be?
I mean, one, they should be in a support mechanism, right? They're not the professionals are going to be the local law enforcement and are going to be the federal agents, that BORTEC, officer that I just named, that ICE individual. They're the ones that are going to be able to do that. But they should be absolutely, I think, a part of an overwhelming force to be able to go, this is not going to be tolerated. Lawlessness will not be tolerated in our country. But we also need to de-escalate things, right? After you've accomplished that, now you de-escalate. Now you start to calm things down. And I think as those of us in the political arena, we need to do that. We need to get back to going, wait a second here. We can have laws. We can also have protests. Let's do it peacefully. Let's calm the jets, and let's go back to our corners.
I know you understood, but I appreciate you waiting as the president was speaking. Tony Gonzalez,
Great.
the Republican
Thanks,
from Texas. Thank you, sir.
Yes, of course.
Appreciate it. All right, I've been telling you about Allie Bradley, right? The LAPD, the National Guard, they are still out in force in Los Angeles. Last night, they arrested over 100 protesters. It's an escalation from the weekend. But across the country, ICE is still conducting its operations in the face of resistance. The administration revealing to NewsNation that ICE just topped 100,000 arrests 4 months or so into the president's second term. That puts them on pace for about 300,000 arrests in a year, well ahead of the pace set in recent years. There are questions, though, about what goes on behind the scenes when these raids take place. And our Allie Bradley, I tell you, she's the best in the business on the southern border. She is indeed, but she is in the state of Nebraska today with what she witnessed there. Allie?
Yeah, hey, Blake. So it was actually the largest workplace enforcement operation in Nebraska. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of questions with the unrest that we're seeing in Los Angeles and across the entire nation. So NewsNation wanted to give you a firsthand look at how these operations really unfold and what happens. So we were the only news crew there this morning as ICE officers and their federal partners went in and they apprehended at least 100 individuals that they say are here illegally. They arrested them in their workplace. In this case specifically, it was Glen Valley Foods in southern Omaha. Agents and officers, they went into that facility with a warrant, and they actually had a list of individuals that they were looking for here that they knew were using fraudulent identities. So many of them, they scattered as soon as officers went in. Some of them were hiding in the rafters. Some of them were hiding in freezers that hit sub-zero temperatures. One man was even hiding in a compartment in the wall, and he actually had box cutters on him, according to ICE, and he brandished those to agents, so he's now facing felony charges for assault against a federal officer. So take a listen to what an agent on site had to say about this issue and about these operations that they're conducting here.
So we did execute a civil search warrant here at this location for personnel from Glen Valley Foods that were using fake IDs, fraudulent IDs, or some type of combination of IDs that weren't real. There was plenty of places for folks to hide, so that slowed down our operation. But as of right now, I can report there's been no safety issues and everything is proceeding as planned.
All right, Blake, a lot of people always want to point back to the business owner, right? They say hold the owner, the business accountable as well. But here's the thing. The guy who runs this business, Gary Rohr, he says he did everything by the book. He said he did verify. The issue here is a lot of these individuals, they were using U.S. citizens' identities, Blake, so they wouldn't have actually flagged as fake in the system. So that was something that this individual, this business was facing. And right now, they're cooperating, Blake. The business isn't facing any charges.
Wow. Our Allie Bradley live today in Nebraska. Allie, thank you so much. Still to come tonight. here on the Hill, right side of the screen, Los Angeles. The back and forth between the president and Gavin Newsom. You just heard from the commander-in-chief his side. What's Gavin Newsom saying as the back and forth continues there when the Hill returns? All right, breaking news here, 650, 350 out there in California. A federal judge in that state has declined California's effort to immediately block President Trump's administration from using Marines and the National Guard to enforce laws in California. This undoubtedly a victory for President Trump and the political feud that shows no signs of slowing down. And it's not limited to the blame game over what we are all seeing. And this is it right here. Before you get to the soundbite, I want to explain what's going on. This is one of the highways there in Los Angeles. And as our Nancy Liu was reporting at the top of the hour, one of the concerns was, are the protesters, are these anti-ICE protesters going to be able to shut down one of the freeways there, one of the highways in Los Angeles? And it appears at this time that that is indeed the case, as you see there. We're trying to figure out exactly which. It's the 101. Thank you. Right on cue. Thank you, Mark. So there's the 101 in Los Angeles, which is now on day 5 here at the center, or at least a part of the story here. So as we've heard this sort of back and forth now with the president and Gavin Newsom, here's some of what has unfolded today.
Called him up to tell him, got to do a better job. He's doing a bad job, causing a lot of death and a lot of potential death.
He's literally created these conditions. He wants to exacerbate the problems. This is Trump's mess. He created it. He knew full well what would happen if he did this.
Just some of the back and forth there. Full panel here with me as we keep the live images up. Taryn Rosenkrantz, a Democratic strategist. Niall Stanage, White House columnist for The Hill. Hannah Brandt, Washington correspondent. And Bill McGinley back with us, former White House cabinet secretary in the first Trump administration. All right, so thank you all, by the way. Nice to see you all. We continue to watch these live pictures there. Bill, on this legal decision today, basically Gavin Newsom tried to say, you know what, get the National Guard and the military out of here, and the judge in the federal court punted essentially to Thursday. Is that what happened? Where does this go next?
And it basically is not surprising because he said that the defendants, meaning the president and Secretary Hegseth, have an opportunity to be heard in this before I decide on the merits. He set a hearing for Thursday. So both parties will be in that federal court on Thursday arguing the merits of this case, and we'll see what the judge does. I'll be surprised if he rules in favor of Gavin Newsom.
Why?
Because we've seen
I know you're there politically, but why from a legal perspective?
Because I think anybody who's watched any of the coverage of these riots have seen cinder blocks thrown at cops. They've seen rocks thrown at cops. They've seen fireworks shot at cops. They've seen destruction of property and widespread looting in those areas where the riots are occurring. And I think the president has a responsibility to keep peace and order, law and order in these neighborhoods. It's important to remember that the president has ordered the National Guard and the Marines in to protect federal agents and federal property. Okay. They're not out patrolling the streets.
Taryn, how does this help the cause of Gavin Newsom, Karen Bass, and those on the left who make the case that the cause is right and just?
Well, I think it's interesting because this is obviously escalated, which was what was the governor's point in the first place. Trump has achieved exactly what he wanted to, which was to escalate the situation instead of de-escalating the situation, which is what we want to do. He called in the National Guard, knowing perfectly well that the police in LA had it under control. The governor said, we do not need you. The mayor and the governor had it under control. And they would have had it under control at that point. And instead, he brought them in, which escalated the situation. And we're seeing it escalate and continue to escalate.
I was just looking at a poll that shows 59% agree with bringing in the National Guard. Do you think you're going to lose this conversation?
Well, I think we're going to lose this conversation as things continue. And I wish that we would have the calm that people would see they're giving him the argument that he wants right now. So I do agree with you there that I hope we can keep this calm.
I don't know what that vehicle is there, but you can see it is clearly surrounded there on the 101, Niall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously scenes like that are problematic, and law breaking is not to be encouraged or endorsed. I do think the question is not so much are people breaking the law, but what is the most effective way of dealing with that. Local law enforcement argue that they had the means to deal with that, and that the bringing in of the National Guard, the deployment of the Marines, is exacerbating the situation. That's the counter argument. It's not saying, yeah, it's great to allow people to go in and set fire to Waymos and block freeways. It's to say what is the most productive way forward.
Look, I'm from California, and, it's hard to see the images on the screen.
I mean,
right?
You're looking at an American flag turned upside down there.
Yeah. And people don't want to see violence in their neighborhoods, certainly. But people in California say most of California right now is peaceful. But the question is, do people across the nation understand the nuance, right? People across the country are seeing things like this play out on their screens. So the question of whether this is politically advantageous for Gavin Newsom to be saying it's all under control kind of becomes the center if he runs for president, right?
You know Trump well. Where do you think he goes next from here?
He's going to stay the course. The ICE agents are going to continue the raids. The National Guard is going to stay there. The Marines are going to stay there to ensure safety, law, and order, and it's not going to change. And I would disagree with my friends here. The LAPD police chief came out and said, we didn't have it under control. We don't have the backup. They've had a lot of problems with the political leadership in California, basically not backing the police, defunding the police. Their recruitment is way down. They don't have the numbers that they used to have. And by the way, the image that you just saw of a crowd surrounding that white SUV, for me, I was there in Southern California for the Rodney King riots. Mm-hmm. And if you remember Reginald Denny, the truck driver, was pulled out of his truck and beaten within an inch of his life. So that's a safety issue when you see those crowds are surrounding cars like that. That is not a voluntary stop by that driver, and they are in trouble.
To the other side, where do you think Newsom goes?
I think that it is really, really important that he continues to preach the message, which he has been, which is that we want to make sure that we don't give Trump a reason to continue this. And we say that we keep calm, and we say that this is something that we need to make sure we continue to get a hold of. But I continue to say that these childish feuds, every week we have another childish feud with Donald Trump. And I think we really need someone who's going to lead this country and bring us together. I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of this not being able to have this as a responsible conversation.
Last word real quick now.
Very quickly, I don't usually disagree with Karen, but I don't think it is a childish feud. I actually think there's very fundamental questions at play here about how you use different agencies of law enforcement or the military and law enforcement roles.
I got to leave it there. The live images there, as you see law enforcement there making what looks like, it appears at least from overhead, an arrest. This is the 101 freeway. I'm Blake Burman. I thank you so much for watching us here on The Hill. Our coverage continues here on NewsNation with Elizabeth Vargas.